fair to say there's a lot going on in education in the United States, in Washington State, and in Federal Way, especially in Federal Way. Because when you combine the leadership of the Federal Way School Board, the strategic vision of Superintendent Dr. Tammy Campbell, and the selfless dedication of the employees working in Federal Way's largest employer, what you get is a prodigious commitment to scholars. And the world better be ready, because we're working all together to make sure that our student scholars have the skills they need to, well, rule the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome for our keynote today, Superintendent and Board Member, Dr. Tammy Campbell.
It's always so much fun following you, Becca. First of all, before I start, I would like to acknowledge a few key people in the audience. And first of all, my partners in the work, the Federal Way School Board of Directors. Would you please stand? This board is an incredible body. It is evidenced by their state recognition as one of 22 boards out of 295 who have been recognized as a board of distinction for the second year in a row. Congratulations, board members. Thank you. I would also have our principals and our central office leaders to please stand at this time. I want you to take a look around the room. These are the folks that are doing it every day in their buildings. These leaders have accepted the challenge to make Federal Way Public Schools better for our scholars, their families, and our community. And I want to applaud you and thank you. Thank you for your efforts. I want to acknowledge the CEO of the Greater Chamber of Federal Way, Becca Martin. Becca, you have been relentless in advocating and acting upon your vision that places schools right at the heart of the work in creating a dynamic and thriving city. And for that, I want to thank you. And lastly, as I would call you my babies, but our scholars, would you please stand? These four scholars represent the 22,000 plus scholars on which we act and serve every single day, and I want you to know that everything we do in service of you. As you take a look at this next slide, you'll see this notion about great schools equals great city. You show me a city that is on the move with hope and real indicators of promise like low crime, industry growth, cultural opportunities and connections, neighborhood growth, jobs, and inclusivity, and I dare you to find a broken and ineffective school system. You won't find it. The nursery of the future of this great city lies within the classrooms of the 38 schools across the district. Now, here is what my time as superintendent in Federal Way has demonstrated to me, that we have nothing but sheroes and heroes across the city who mentor. Raise your hand if you mentor in this room. Raise your hand. Who donate scholarships. Raise your hand if you're part of an organization who's done that. Bag lunches. How many of you have given time to our schools? Backpacks and so much more are on incredible display every day across the system. This, in fact, is the secret weapon of Federal Way, and I don't think we showcase it enough. As you listen to our journey, I want you, each of you at your tables, to think about two questions. What is the work that's happening in Federal Way? What are they doing for our scholars? And how might I lean in and partner with the school district on their strategies and goals? Just to give you a brief overview, again, we have 20% of our scholars are English language learners. About 14% receive special education services. We have 38 schools, and I know you might have seen the number 39, but we combined Taft Academy with Sahali, so that eliminated one of our sites. We have over 118 languages spoken. 60% of our scholars receive free or reduced lunches, and we have 23,322 scholars in Federal Way Public Schools. So one of the things we did this summer, we wanted to ask our scholars, what will this year bring? You know, we've rolled out our strategic plan, and in that plan is our bold vision. Well, in our second year of implementing our strategic plan, we're refining our skills and we're going deeper. This is the year that we continue to improve. I want you to take a minute to listen to our scholars and staff and our board as they share what's at stake as we embark on the 2017-18 school year.
This is the year I start kindergarten.
This is the year I learned to write better.
This is the year I want to learn more about science.
This is the year I'm challenged in my courses.
This is the year I take algebra.
This is the year I make my mom proud.
This is the year I start high school.
I think this is the year that I want to make some kind of difference.
So this is the year I joined leadership, and I'm really looking forward to mentoring and all that kind of stuff.
This is the year I graduate.
This year we collaborate and engage and inspire all of our scholars to see the very best of themselves and their futures.
This is the year that I'm going to empower my students to be the best scientists, mathematicians, and literary scholars that they can be.
This is the year I inspire scholars to be lifelong readers.
And this is the year I step out of my comfort zone, rethink teaching and learning, and dive headfirst into STEM.
This is the year that we see greater scholar success for all.
This is the year I will work relentlessly to ensure that every student has the opportunity and the tools to be successful at Federal Way Public Schools.
This is the year that we inspire all of our scholars to come to school every day.
This is the year that we reach and teach every scholar. Have a great school year. So I hope you heard the hope, the aspiration, and what we intend to accomplish this year. Our mission statement really is the core of our work. It describes how we're going to behave every day in our organization if we're going to accomplish our goals. And I want you to take a minute to just read it. I'm not going to read it for you, but I want you to just read that mission statement. And as you scan it, I want you to pay attention to words like high expectations, high support, no excuses, results, data, a voice, a dream, and a bright future. That really is what informs the work that we do in our system. And I want now for you to focus on the goals that we've identified for ourselves. And what I'm going to do is share with you some key data points that will illustrate where we're making progress and where we still need to focus. What I promise this community is to always be transparent with you about the work that's happening and where we know we can get better. And one of the quotes that I talk to the team about is what gets measured gets done. And I will be sharing some data for each of these goals, and you'll see multiple measures. We don't just use a state assessment to tell us how we're doing. We use student voice and all kinds of metrics. So let's look at goal 1. This particular metric that I'll be sharing with you is the percent of scholars meeting or exceeding grade level standards in ELA. When we were in school, we would have called that reading. And mathematics by the end of 3rd grade. One of the things we do in our system, we give a test called the ERLA. It's a test that we give, an assessment that we give frequently to see where our scholars are reading. Well, in the fall of 2016, a year ago, 7% of our 3rd graders were reading on target. 7%. A year later, when we're assessing our scholars, 25%, 26%. So we're ramping that up. And I want to give my elementary principals a big time kudos for that, because that's a significant increase for that to happen. I'm going to show you a prompt here in a minute that'll explain it's not just reading a book the way we think. Our scholars have to do complex tasks. So our third grade reading on target increased by almost 20% in a year. And one of the big things that we added was curriculum. Believe it or not, across the district, teachers were just writing curriculum by themselves. We weren't purchasing those materials. In Federal Way, we have a guaranteed viable curriculum for all of our scholars across our schools in English language arts. Here's some big things that we're doing to make it better so that when I come back next year, the percentages are continuing to climb. We're going to have an early learning convening on November 16th. We're inviting all of our preschool providers, all of our early learning providers, all in one space, talking about what a kindergartner needs to be successful. We're going to provide materials to them, and we're going to strengthen those partnerships. Have you passed by the Uptown Square area? You'll see we've got an early learning area there now. We have added 3 preschools there where we can provide service to our scholars. At your tables is something I'm really excited about. It's a learning partnership guide. If there's a district person at the table, can you pass those around? This we did not have. This learning partnership guide tells every scholar and their family at every grade level what they need to be successful. I think that this particular document will be a huge difference maker in closing the knowledge gap for our families so they know what we're expecting of our scholars. We handed all of these out at our back to school nights, and we put those in the hands of every single scholar, grades K through 12. We're articulating what we expect. Goal 2, this is the goal that all of our schools have adopted. I'm going to share with you 2 key metrics. This is about the percent of scholars participating at least 95% of classroom instructional time. Basically, are they in class? And scholar-led conferences. So a year ago, our attendance was at 93.7%, but with our robust attendance campaign, it's bumped up to 94.4%. And I think that takes a lot of lift. Believe it or not, to get these incremental increases, it takes a lot of effort because you have to have every single one of our scholars making those adjustments, and we're well on our way to seeing the improvements that we like. Scholar-led conferences, we've got to partner with our families. We cannot do it alone. Well, in 2016, we had about 73% of our families coming to conferences. As of the spring of 2017, we had 92% of our families coming to our conferences, hearing how to partner with schools, and I want to give our schools a big round of applause for that. Our goal is always 100%, but here's again metrics indicating the success that we're having. Almost a 20% increase in our scholar-led conference attendance. Here's some of the things that we're doing. We're increasing our mentoring programs, both the communities and schools and our own program. We're continuing to run our attendance campaign. Our schools will always and continue to have that goal of 100% participation in scholar-led conferences and family academies. We have other parents leading sessions with other families, and they conduct these sessions in their own language so that families can hear from others about how they can participate in school, and we continue to support that effort. So that's goal 2. Let's talk about goal 3. The percent of scholars that are engaged and challenged as measured by a perception survey. Every November, we started it for the first time last year, we survey our scholars and we ask questions like, are you engaged? Do you feel challenged? And here's what we learned. 60% of our scholars said they felt that they were engaged. 78% felt challenged. We see that as an asset. That's not where we want to be in the end, but that's a great starting point. And so now we have ideas about how we might continue to support engagement, like the STEM and STEAM Lighthouse schools, Woodmont, Nautilus, as well as TAF at Sahali. Those schools are schools where we're really pressing project-based learning. This summer we had Camp Invention and Summer Learning Academies. The STEM Expo that you just mentioned from Cascade Blood, we're going to have another STEM Expo March 14th, and we intend for that to be bigger. We've got our elementary scholars with something called Spheros, little robots, learning how to code in elementary school, chess camps. And here's something that I'm really excited about. We've got scholar representatives on the board. Our 2 representatives who are on the school board right now, would you please stand? Cedric and Michaela. Thank you. Cedric and Michaela are a member of the Superintendent's Advisory, and there are about 70 scholars who I meet with once a month, and they generate all kinds of powerful ideas, like the process for scholars to be on the board. The other thing they generated was something called a Because of You Awards. We did this for the first time last month, where scholars nominate teachers who've made a difference in their lives. We honored 6 teachers last month, and next month I intend for us to continue to do that work, but that's all being driven by student voice. And so there are so many ways that we're looking to engage our scholars. Goal 4, and this is where we've got some lift to do. The percent of scholars meeting grade level standards in core subject areas, as well as the percent of scholars demonstrating proficiency in our grading system. So here's what I want you to think about as you look at this English language arts prompt. How many of you can remember what you were doing in 8th grade? Think about 8th grade, and you were in a reading or an English language arts class. I want you to take a minute without looking at the screen and tell your partner 1 or 2 things that you might remember about 8th grade. What were you doing? Okay. Dan, I think I heard what you were saying you were doing in 8th grade. Were you being naughty? Is that what it was? So here's what I want you to pay attention to. In 8th grade, our 8th graders have to compare and contrast. I want you to listen to this. Compare and contrast the structure of 2 or more texts and analyze how the differing structure of each text contributes to its meaning and style. Is that what you thought we were talking about when we were talking about ELA? Probably not. Here's a prompt and there's a text below it. That's the kind of task that our scholars are being asked to do, and that's what we're being measured on. So let's look at our data in ELA. So this is Federal Way Public Schools, 3rd grade, 38% of our scholars are proficient. 8th grade, 49%. Now, as you don't become overly alarmed, we know that this is a growth trend we're on. Look at the state. The state average is 53%. And at 8th grade, it's 59%. The last column represents the targets we've set up inside the district that we're shooting for because we want to outperform the state. Our target is 58%, and for 2018, 67%. Now, before someone says, well, don't you have bigger targets than that? What you have to do is have those targets incrementally so that you can actually reach them. And so we have a plan for how we're going to address that, and you're going to hear more in a minute about that. What about 3rd grade? What do you remember about 3rd grade? And I want you to look at this 3rd grade math problem. So scholars are being asked to interpret products of whole numbers and to interpret 5 times 7 as the total number of objects in 5 groups of 7 each. They're being asked to do this as 3rd graders. This is the problem. They're presented literally, and this is the language that we're using with our scholars, presented with a proposition or a conjecture. The student is asked to identify or construct reasoning that justifies or refutes the proposition or conjecture. 3rd grade. Okay? So I know it puts sheer terror in your mind to be in 3rd grade again, probably. But this is what our scholars are being asked to do. Not to get too technical with you, but that's what they're being assessed on in mathematics. This is what our schools are focused on. So here's our data. I don't have to explain a whole lot. You see where we are, you see where the state is in red, and you see our targets. This is where we've got to improve. Now, here's what I want to tell you, in fairness to this system. This system has operated for 2 decades without curriculum. I've never been in a district that didn't have curriculum, and that's what we have been embarking on for the last 2 years, purchasing curriculum, buying that curriculum, training teachers on it. You imagine if you had literally hundreds of teachers each creating their own thing, you're not going to get the results you want. And we're well on our way to addressing this. Now, this is something that's exciting. This is a representation of every school across the state, all of the schools. And that line in the middle is called a regression line, and it shows where the average performance of all those schools are across the state. How many of the schools that are either on the line or above the line do you think are Federal Way schools? That are either on the line or above the line? Tell partner, how many do you predict? 30%. 30%. 4? Okay, well, let's find out. Remember, we have 38 schools. I want you to remember this. All of those schools that are above it, that are outperforming their peers, are Federal Way schools. Now, here's what I want you to pay attention to. The schools that are over here are high in free and reduced lunch. There's more poverty here. These are the schools that have very little poverty, okay? And 16 of our schools are outperforming or on pace with their peers across the state, and I don't think we put that message out there. So even with our data, other districts and schools are struggling with similar data, and I think this is a place for us to see as an asset and for us to continue to build. For the first time this year, the board and I are going to be recognizing schools that are outperforming this line, and we're doing it with what we call a Set the Pace Award. We're starting to recognize it. We believe that these are the kinds of things that we want to do because we're comparing likes to like. Just some next steps of things that we're doing. We're continuing to adopt curriculum. We're building a course catalog in this district so that our families at secondary know the kind of courses their scholars should take. And we're really going to get standards-based grading reporting right. We've got a committee and we're rolling out products to help scholars and their families know how to navigate the grading system. And our last goal, Goal 5, here's what we're tracking. The percent of ninth grade scholars on track and the percent of scholars who complete application for college-bound scholarship, FAFSA and WASFA. Now look at this data. Federal Way Public Schools has the highest college-bound completion rates, and we've done this for the last 2 years. And what this means, this is a scholarship that we have to sign our scholars up by 8th grade. If they persist and go on to college, their college is paid for. You can see all these other districts, and you can see our efforts that we're getting our scholars the resources so that when they do graduate, they're much more likely to persist because costs will not be a barrier. So that's a success. I think we've got to give ourselves a big round of applause for this because this has only happened in the last 2 years. Also, FAFSA and WASFA sign up, basically financial aid, we've increased that by 7.6%. And here's one we're really tracking. So in 2016, 69% of our ninth graders came in ready. 2015, 60% came in ready, my apologies. 2016, 69% came in ready, meaning they had the credits they need to move on. And now look at where we are in 2017. 78% of our ninth graders were ready, meaning they had the credits. This is how we're going to stop the dropout factory, and this is how we're going to really increase scholars having those opportunities post-high school. So again, this is another celebration for our high school folks and for our Graduation Assurances Committee. Again, a big round of applause for those folks. Our goal is 100%, but we're well on our way. We've increased in the last year by 9%. So here's the big celebration. You can see our graduation rate has slowly been increasing 76 to 78 to 80%. This past graduating class in June, 83%. Our graduation rate has increased and we met our actual district target this year. So that is a huge success. 83%, we've never had a graduation rate that high, and I want to have our high school principals and our middle school principals to please take a stand. I think this is a joint effort. High school principals, middle school. Yep, absolutely. Yep, thank you. Here's something that's not known, and I know I've heard this perception around the state of our high schools. Well, the percent of high school graduates attending college, 60% across the state is the percent. Federal Way Public Schools is outperforming the state in this area, 62%. TJ has 63% of their scholars going off to college. Did you know that Todd Beamer has 70% of their scholars going to college? Todd Beamer High School is outperforming the state by 10% in terms of college going. And I think that's an incredible success for our district and for the school and the scholars who are there, as well as all of our other high schools. Here are some of the things that we're doing. We're continuing to monitor graduation assurances, looking at credits, the course catalog, and the learning partnership guides. We've got a plan to continue to improve in this area. One of the things that I'm asked is, Dr. Campbell, you always talk about college going. What about the scholars who aren't going to do that? Well, you need to know we've got a robust CTE program that's really thriving across our 4 high schools. We have 5 career pathways: arts and communications, business and marketing, engineering, human services, and health sciences and agricultural sciences. We have 2,200 scholars that are participating in that arts and communications pathway, 1,300 in the business marketing pathway, 1,200 in the engineering pathway, 2,100 in the human services pathway, and about 900 scholars in the health sciences pathways. So for a total of about 8,000 scholars who are participating in these career pathways across our high schools. What's really exciting is that they get the opportunity to have company tours and job shadowing experiences at places like Amazon, Boeing, Hexcel, Microsoft. We have 100+ worksite learning at local businesses right here in Federal Way. And our CT advisory committees, we've got local business and industry leaders helping to inform our programs, letting us know if we're getting our scholars on track. And here's some of our key partnerships. Diane, you sent me an email asking about were we taking advantage of Core Plus with Boeing. Yes, we are. We're taking advantage of it at Microsoft and other places. And then when TJ is rebuilt, just like Federal Way High School, we'll be able to retrofit that school so that they can have the kind of experiences that you can have in the CNC machines and all those other opportunities at Federal Way High School. So again, we're taking care of and thinking about those career pathways. So that's the educational side. I want to just really quickly remind you, we have to invest in infrastructure. And on November 7th, we know what's on the ballot. We know what's at stake, all of those buildings, so that we can modernize our facilities. We can increase local job opportunities. And I'm hoping that all of you go out to vote, and hopefully you hear that we've got a plan, we've got some action steps, and we are well on our way. A couple of things. When you think about where we've made some strides at scholar-led conferences, 3rd grade reading, 9th grade on track, the class of 17's graduation rates. Where we need to get better is 3rd and 8th grade math, 3rd and 8th grade ELA. We've got to pass the bond, and in 2018, we've got a levy that'll be coming so that we can continue to maintain our learning programs. But I want to end with a couple of things. What we're focusing on in our district, it's about culture. And I really can't stress this enough. We can have metrics all we want, but if we don't attend to culture, we're not going to get there. And there's this quote that says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." I believe that. We believe and we act upon this idea that the students' interests drive every decision that we make. We are responsive. So if someone calls a school, I tell principals, my expectation is someone emails me, we get back to folks within 24 hours. We're transparent, which is why I'm sharing you our good data along with our data that's not so good. We're a learning organization. We're results oriented. We're professional. And we have a culture of high expectations. And I want to end with this as I show you a short clip from some of our scholars. I'm often asked, why are we so insistent on calling our students scholars? And I ask you, why not? Why not? Why do we not see the power of words? Words are seeds that do more than blow around. They land in our hearts and not on the ground. Be careful what you plant and careful what you say. You might have to eat what you planted one day. Think about that. Words are the seeds that do more than blow around. They land in our hearts and not on the ground. Be careful what you plant and careful what you say. You might have to eat what you planted one day. Our students are our future. They will be the living plants of our investments in them. The words we choose convey expectations and aspirations. We have not abandoned the word students. You heard me use it all throughout the presentation. We simply have added another word to our lexicon that depicts possibility, high expectation, and hope. Listen to our students as they share why the word scholar is our word of choice and a word we're never going to back away from.
Scholar is a learner.
It's a person who doesn't accept failure and tries to become a better person of themselves.
To be a scholar, you're overachieving to be the best you can be in school, in education, in your sports, and anything in life.
It empowers us. When we think of a scholar, we think of someone who's pursuing their education farther than what they're actually doing. So we're pushing ourselves. We're setting higher expectations to ourselves than what the district or what our teachers have for ourselves.
It makes me feel more advanced and be able to want to do more because I feel more motivated.
It sets the tone that we should never settle for anything less than what a scholar would attain for.
It makes me feel more motivated, like I have a bright future compared to just being someone who sits in a classroom and has to go to school every day.
It sets a tone for not only the students, or well, for the kids, but for the community as well, that these kids aren't just going to class to learn, that they're young men and women in training so that they can be productive members of society like a scholar should be and actually contribute to the overall betterment of the world we live in.
It just inspires us to think that we're, I don't know, at like a higher level of thinking, and it pushes us and motivates us to do greater things than what we thought we were capable of.
It makes me feel like I can do anything.
So we're well on our way with our scholars at the center. Thank you for all that you do.